All right, it's Laura with My Home Matters, and I am going to attempt to show you how to make the chunky pumpkin. And I'm hoping that if I have my camera in the right angle, I might be able to show you. This is a tough one to be able to show as I go, because you really kind of need to see exactly what I'm doing. So I've got my tripod, which is, I'm trying to work around my tripod to keep that camera there. And I'm gonna do my very best to show you how to make one of these. So you need a chunky yarn. I think this is considered 7-weight jumbo. This particular brand, it's the same as the yellow that I used on the sample pictures, is Yarn Bee Eternal Bliss. And the most common place you can get it is at Hobby Lobby, but you can also get it at various places online. Yarn Bee Eternal Bliss. So, but they have plenty of other brands. It does not have to be that. You just want something similar to this, this weight. So I'm going to, first of all, the yarn that is, you know, the ball of yarn itself is called your working yarn. And so I'm going to refer to either the working yarn or the end of the yarn. So the first thing I'm going to do is lay out the working yarn kind of off to the side back here. And I'm going to fold my yarn back so that I have probably 12 to 15 inches here. We're going to need this tail at the end later on. So we want to have about an extra foot past our first loop. So I'm going to lay that out so that I have at least about 12 inches there. You don't want too much either, so I wouldn't go more than about 15 inches. But then up here, I'm going to kind of just show you how we're going to be wanting to make a bunch of little loops like this that are, you know, about this size. I can fit, you know, I'd say maybe 2 fingers. I wouldn't go any bigger than that, but sometimes the first time around, it's kind of natural to end up having bigger loops, but it is better if you go a little bit smaller. It's just a little bit harder to work with. So I'm going to do my best to explain everything here. So I'm laying this out, and then I'm going to show, like, I need this to be pinched together and knotted. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to flip this over or twist it so that loop is kind of flipped over there. And then I'm going to reach in through that. I'm going to grab the X here. I'm going to grab where it's crossed. So all I did was sort of get an idea of where it's pinched together. I'm going to twist it and flip that loop over. So the end is still down here and the working yarn is still up here. I'm going to grab where I have them crossed over, reach through this little loop, and I'm going to grab a hold of the working yarn, pull it through, and then let go with the left hand, or, you know, the non-dominant hand, and just kind of pull all of this sort of tight. It's not super tight, but sort of tight. Now you can see it's way too big of a loop right now. I'm gonna fix that. You can fix that by just coming back and pulling one of those sides back through. But let me go back and show you that one more time. So I had it about like that. I figured out approximately where I was gonna twist. I flipped that little loop over. The working yarn is still over here and the end is down here. I'm gonna grab that crisscross there, reach through, grab the working end of the yarn, pull it through, let go with the other hand, and then kind of grab it all and pull away from each other. And that makes what's called a slip knot. So again, I have that too big. So this is plenty long. The tail is plenty long. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the working yarn and pull that back through so that it's really only like 2 of my fingers there. And that's about how big all of your loops you're going to want them to be. So we just want to pull this tight, not so tight. Now you're going to notice you can pull tight, but the tighter you pull, if you pull too hard, the yarn will snap. So you can feel like the wick that's inside of it. If you pull too hard at any point, you can snap that and break it. So you want to pull tight, but not so tight that you break the yarn. So that is my first loop. Now I'm going to pull the working yarn. Well, maybe I'll have it kind of straight out in front of me. So I have the tail going over to the left. Now this might be opposite for those of you that are left-handers. I'm going to do this as a right-hander. You would do this opposite if you were working left-handed, I would think. But you're going to reach through. So here's the end and here's the working yarn. You're going to reach through from the top down through that first loop. And you're going to grab the working yarn just like you did a minute ago. Pull it up through just like you did a minute ago for the slip knot and form another loop that's about the same size. You want them to be pretty uniform. So let me pull that back out. Here's your first knot from the slip knot. You're going to reach down through that from the top down through, grab the working yarn, pull it up through and make another loop. And so that it doesn't get twisted, you want to keep your working yarn sort of always up towards the top. So now you have 2 loops. That's 1 and that's 2. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to reach down through, from the top down through, grab the working yarn, pull it up through to form a loop. That's loop 3. The working yarn is still up here. Do it again. That forms loop 4. I'm going to do this 10 times. So there's 4. Reach down through from the top, down through, grab the working yarn, pull up, and make another loop. Reach down through, grab the working yarn, pull up through to make another loop. If you lose count along the way, and if you make them too big, like if I make it too big, then you just grab the working yarn and bring it back down to about the same size. So if you lose count of how many loops you've made, you're going to go back here and find your original knot, your slip knot, right here. And then right next to that, you should see at the top, you're going to count the loops at the top. There's a loop at the top and there's a little hole at the bottom. You're going to count those top loops. So here's 1, 2, 3. You can see I can stick my finger through there. 4, 5, and then I'm on 6. So I'm counting these top holes here that I could stick my finger in. And this is number 6. So reach down through, grab the working yarn, bring it through. That made number 7. Reach down through, grab the working yarn, pull it through. Okay, so that's 8, 9, and again, so that the loops don't get twisted, keep your working yarn up here towards the top. And that one's even a little bit too big. 10. Let me just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so that last loop is number 10. Okay, I'm actually going to make one more. I'm going to make it a number 11. So I pull that through there. Okay, now, here's number 11. This guy here is going to come around and meet. We're going to form a circle now. This loop here is going to end up forming a loop and connecting to the start over here. So with the working yarn up here, I'm going to kind of turn it on its side like this. The working yarn is on the top. So I'm going to turn it on its side and I'm going to form a circle with it Here's my number 11 loop. The working yarn is still on the top side of this little wall here, this little ledge. I'm going to take my number 11, I'm going to come over here, find that slip knot, and then find the first hole on the upper side of this chain that you made. Find the slip knot and then go to the very first hole on the upper side. So see, there's a hole down here and there's a hole up here. You want the top hole. You're going to take your number 11 loop and slide it in through that first hole just so it sticks out and stays. So you have him sticking out. And then you're just going to leave him be. You don't want him to come back out. You just want to be careful, kind of keep this tail off to the side here. And then we're going to go in a clockwise direction, looking for all of those top holes that we were locating before to count. So here's the working yarn. Right to the side of it should be the first hole. I'm going to take the working yarn, come from behind that hole. If it was big enough, I'd say reach through and grab the working yarn. You're always reaching through and grabbing the working yarn to make the next loop. But it's a really small hole, so it's hard to reach through and grab it. So I'm going to push it through from the back so that I can grab it and pull it through and make another little loop like that. So let me pull that back out. So you may have to keep rewinding to you know, till you get to this point. Pause and rewind. But the working yarn is, if you think of it as coming straight up from the top, immediately to the right as you go clockwise, there is the first hole there. So I'm going to push that working yarn in from behind so that it pulls up into the center, towards the center of the circle, and then form another loop about the same size as the rest. And just let it sit there. Then I'm going to turn slightly, and I'm going to keep going clockwise. I'm going to go to the next hole. Just, you know, kind of run your fingers. You want to stay on the upper side of the chain, but go to the next hole. I would reach through and grab that if I could, but since it's such a small hole, I'm going to push the yarn in to help myself out and then grab it to form the little loop. So now I have like bunny ears right now. Okay, keep moving to the right, go to the next hole, bring the working yarn, push it in from the back to grab it, form a little loop, another bunny ear. And now at this point, if this tail starts to get in your way, what I would do is just kind of just stuff it in the middle here, just for now. Just hold it in the middle there. Try not to lose, you know, your first loop that was holding this together, but you can at least kind of get that out of the way and just stuff it in the middle. So you'd have that in the middle, but you still have this guy off to the side, sticking out, holding the circle together. The rest of them are facing upward. That way you don't get confused between the working yarn and the end. If that helps. All right, so I'm working clockwise. I'm finding the next hole in the chain that we made. Kind of looked like a pretzel chain that we made at first. Pulling that up through to make the next one. So try to keep them all about the same. Move on, do it again. And what you should have after you complete this first round, all the way around the circle, is 10 total loops. Reach through, grab the working yarn, pull it up and make another one. All the way around, and you'll know if you have the right number. If you made 11 total, 10 plus that extra that connected on the original chain, then from now on, you're gonna have 10 loops around. So I'm back to where I have it sticking through, holding it together. So if I count that one and I kind of turn it so that it's the same direction as the rest, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you had 11 loops to begin with, and then 10 of them from here on out. So I'm just keeping that end piece kind of in the center there to keep it away from everything. So now you've kind of got this flower looking thing. So now I'm going to continue to work all the way around, making sure that each one gets another loop. So I know to keep counting in tens. So I'm going to go to this one. Here's the one that's actually tucked through that was holding the loop together, the circle together. And I'm going to reach through that, if you can, if it's big enough to kind of get your fingers through. Grab the working yarn again, just like before, pull it through, and make a loop. Now, you want to make sure, since we're working in a clockwise direction, I'm going to put the yarn kind of over here, and I'm going to make sure that my tail is, or that the working yarn is over here on the right, so that I can kind of twist it to make sure that these all start going in the right direction. So my loop comes up through, but I have the working yarn to the right side of that loop, so that I can move to the next one and pull it up through the next one and make another loop. So the yarn, working yarn, stays over here. So if you can kind of see back here. So here's the working yarn. I'm just pushing it up through from behind, pulling it through, making another loop. Try to keep them all about the same. So I'm going to do that the whole way around, and then make sure that I have 10. It's easier to keep your working yarn loose, so like unravel a little bit every so often so that you're not pulling. This doesn't get tight as you pull. Okay. Now I'm going to see, I think that's number 10. So let's just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I've done 2 rows, and it's all going to kind of depend on how big you want your pumpkin. One of mine was a little smaller than the other, so you're just going to continue making these around. So I'm going to keep going, and I'll probably fast forward a little bit of this. But you're going to keep going around and making, you know, a round of 10, and then another round of 10, and then another round of 10, and kind of get a feel for, you know, how big is that going to make your pumpkin? And how big do you want it? So I'm working on the 3rd time around. It also might depend on how much yarn you have. If you're working with partial ball, you may not be able to make it as big. But I was able to get 2 out of one big, at least 2 out of one big skein. Okay, I think that's another round of 10. So you're gonna notice that they're gonna start getting further apart. The loops are gonna get a little bit further apart. That's why I try to keep them on the smaller side, because the bigger they are, the more space you're gonna have between the little knit sections, and then you might see the filler if they're a little bit too big. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, I'm gonna go again. It kind of starts to look like some kind of sea creature as you're going. going to keep making another one. Again, I'm kind of trying to keep these on the small side because they're getting further away. So the more space you have in between these, the more likely you may have too much space for your liking when it comes time to put the batting in. But I'm still trying to keep them consistent with what I did before, size-wise. The whole way through, I'm trying to keep them about the same. I've lost count on how many rounds that I've made. Okay, now you can kind of see it wants to kind of naturally start to curl up. And that's okay if you let it curl up. You can keep working like this, or you can try to flatten it out. I kind of tend to let it do that so that flattening out, I'm afraid, will pull the knots or the loops out a little bit. So I kind of try to just go with it. But I'm still just pulling up those loops from behind. All right. Now let's see if I can make sure that I've got. So you want to keep track as you're going to make sure that you've, kept 10 around and then 10 around and then 10 around. Now, I'm going to go ahead and assume that this is going to be a big enough pumpkin for this one. I will try to count these loops here for you. I'm going to say it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I would say 7 to 8 times around. Now, at this point, you can kind of decide. If you look at the outside the way it is, you can see that the stitch kind of has more of a horizontal pattern. That's typically the back. So when we make a blanket, that's typically what the back looks like. And you see more of this stitch on the front that's more of a vertical pattern. So depending on what you want, you can decide whether you want it to stay like this or if you want to flip it and have the normal side facing out. Either way makes a pretty pumpkin. I'm going to flip mine so that I have that vertical pattern facing out. So I'm just gently going to try to flip this without losing those loops that are, sitting there. I'll have to make sure I have 10 of them. But I want to try to get, so I'm going to push this tail back through here. So here's my working yarn, and I'm actually going to cut off so that I have about 12 to 15 inches left over here so that I can get rid of that. Okay, now to sew up the bottom, we just kind of have to cinch this together. So here's the tail. Here's the slip knot that I had originally created. And here is that first chain that you created that looked like a pretzel at the beginning. It's really hard to see exactly what to do, but here's the tail, the slip knot. Okay, so you can kind of see there's just a little bit of a break there as compared to the rest. So I'm going to go right to the right of that slip knot and find the first loop, the first hole. and I'm either gonna come up from behind or go in through the front. It doesn't matter. You're just gonna pull that tail through that first hole. And then if you came in from behind, then go to the next loop. Here's the next one. And then push it in from the front this time. So I'm just weaving it basically. In and out, in and out, in and out. So I'm going towards the back now. And then you can kind of gently guide it to start tightening up. Now I'm going to go to the next hole. And I'm going to pull it in from the back. Since that's the opposite of what I just did. Pull it all the way through. Cinch it a little bit. It doesn't cinch a whole lot until you get closer to the end. Find the next hole, press it through all the way, try to cinch it, but don't pull so hard because you might break it and you don't want that to happen. So then find the next hole, push the yarn all the way through it, try to cinch it a little bit, press it through. So you're just weaving it in from the front and then in from behind and then in from, see now there's the first time I was actually able to close it up a little bit more. So I'm just going to the next hole now. Here's the next hole. Pull it through all the way. Cinch it a little bit. Next hole, push it through. Same thing till you've got all the way around. So now it's pretty much covered. Again, don't pull so hard that you break your yarn. So now you just have, you know, a much smaller hole here. So now I'm just gonna hold this up here and I'm gonna loop it around as if I'm gonna make a knot in this piece. And then as I make the knot, I'm gonna try to push the knot as close to that hole as I can. Just to finish it off with a knot. So there's the knot in my yarn. I would take that, I don't know if I can take it back out and show you that again. I guess I can. So let me show you. So you've cinched all the pieces together. Hold this up. Act as if you're just gonna make a knot in the yarn. But as you're pulling the knot, try to push it towards, down as far towards the hole as you can. And mine didn't work out very good. So I'm gonna take that out again. And I'm gonna try to make the loop closer down so that when I tighten it up, I can push it closer down. There we go. So there's my knot in the yarn. And I'm just gonna push that through and stuff it down in to the inside. This is gonna be the inside of my pumpkin because remember, I wanted it to be this way. So now, you're pushing it through into the inner part of your pumpkin and then that'll just get hidden in there. So now I have to cinch up the top and I need to add the batting. And what I'm using for batting is just stuff that I had left from various projects. This is just polyfill white batting, if you can see that. Probably from Joann Fabrics. So again, I'm going to try to form this back up a little bit towards the center. It doesn't want to naturally stay that way, but I want to make sure that I still see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let me double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so I'm gonna pretty much do the same thing. I'm not gonna cinch the whole thing together, but I'm gonna get it started so that then I have an easier time of it filling it up. So I'm going to start, so I'm gonna kind of keep my thumb here for a minute in the loop where I just end, you know, the yarn is coming through. I'm just gonna keep my thumb there just to hold that knot from pulling through. But again, you're just gonna weave this in and out, all these loops. So let's say I go in this direction of this loop, pull the yarn all the way through. I'm just holding this one still. I'm not doing anything with this one. I pulled the end of the yarn through that next loop over. Now I'm gonna go in from the other direction to the next loop, push it through and all the way in. and you can kind of cinch that tight. But I don't want to cinch it so tight that I lose this loop by starting that. So I'm just holding my thumb there to keep it from disappearing, to keep this loop from pulling through too. So to the next loop, push the piece of yarn all the way through that loop and cinch it a little bit. Push it into the next loop, pull it all the way through, and it's going to kind of naturally cinch up. Go to the next one from the other direction, pull it through, and you kind of have to push a little bit to get it to cinch, but I can probably take my finger out of this one now because it's probably okay. You don't want to pull so hard that you cinch it so tight, but I just didn't want to lose this first loop here. Okay, into the next one, pull it all the way through. Keep an eye on that first one, but cinch it gently. And now I have like 4 more left. So now I'm going to go ahead and take some of this batting. I'm going to pull it apart a little bit so that it's not like formed into one particular shape. I'm going to stick that in there. You can make it as full as you want. Maybe just a little bit more. And then I'm going to continue. So I've got the next loop. I'm going to push through that loop all the way through, cinch it up a little bit. Next one. Cinch. Almost done. Even if you accidentally go in those loops from the same direction 2 times in a row, it's really not going to matter. The point is that you grab each loop and gently cinch each time so that you don't miss any. And then you can decide, you know, did I put enough in? Did I not put enough in? So you could always unloop the last one if you feel like you need more batting. Just make sure you don't lose it. And you could put a little bit more in if you want. I don't necessarily need more. I just wanted to show you what you could do. And then you could go back and re-cinch that last one. Now, once you get to here, so there's the bottom, and it may not be perfect. You might need to like kind of press in on certain spots to get it to be totally flat, but you can fool around with it a little bit. But now you've got this piece just like you did on the bottom. So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to hold this up. We're going to form a knot like we're making a knot, as we are, but I'm going to do it kind of as close to the base as I can so that when I pull that tight, I can push the knot as close to the top of the pumpkin as I can. And I'm only going to do it once because I have all of this that I can tuck in. So it's not like it's going to come unraveled. It's got one knot in it and it's got all of this. Find that hole that's still left there. Try to push the knot down in there plus all of the rest of the tail. Or you could cut it off a little bit too if you want. Press it down in there. You could make him a little taller pumpkin, or you could press him down, make him a little flatter. But, you know, it's probably not going to be perfect, and I've done a few of these, so even mine aren't perfect. But the nice thing about this option is that you don't have a pattern that you have to follow necessarily. So then the last step would be, I just have a twig from the yard that I cut down, and I just insert that. You could hot glue it if you want. And then you can add raffia, you can add twine, you can tie a bow around. I'm probably gonna do a combination of that, just like I did on the other ones. I hope this is helpful. It's one of those videos where you might have to rewind and rewatch several times, but This is a little bit harder to show, but I hope that it's helpful, and please show me your outcomes if you do some. And as always, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and follow My Home Matters on social media, Instagram and Facebook. Thank you. Hope this was helpful.